Welcome back to the kitchen, everybody. It's your boy, the Mad Chef, and I'm super excited to be bringing you this video today. We're going to be reimagining, reinventing, and recreating an old recipe of mine. It's time to think outside of the biscuit, everybody. Yep, not the bun, the biscuit. Because we're going to be making a homemade breakfast pizza completely from scratch. Full disclosure, up until just now, I was making this breakfast recipe using canned biscuits and canned gravy. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, it turned out pretty okay, but it can be better. Today we're going to be making everything, including our own sausage gravy and flaky layer buttermilk buttery biscuit crust from scratch. Alright, before we can even start discussing on how to put together our flaky buttermilk biscuit crust, we need to get our toppings cooked first because none of these ingredients can go on raw. And we're going to start with our homemade sausage gravy first because that's the sauce. That's the base of this pizza. Plus, it takes the longest to cook. We're going to have some scrambled eggs and some bacon on top of it. So the way I do my eggs is, this is 3 whole eggs, just beaten with a splash of half and half and salt and pepper to taste. You can do your scrambled eggs how you normally do them, but this is the way I do mine. This is 5 strips of thick cut smoked bacon that I've cut into some lardons. And let's get started cooking our sausage gravy. A large pan that's been preheating on medium-high heat, we're going to be adding in 1 roll of a good quality breakfast sausage. Guys, normally I don't mind store brands or conscious-minded brands, but those cheaper sausages produce too much oil. So the cheaper the sausage, the worse your gravy is going to turn out. It's honestly worth the extra buck or so to get a good sausage. So all I'm using here is a single roll of Jimmy Dean original breakfast sausage. You can see me start to break this meat apart a little bit, but it's still a little too cold. It hasn't been out of the refrigerator for very long. So we're going to let that sear for about 2 minutes. And after 2 minutes, this is what our sausage looks like. Got some nice sear happening. There's some definite flavors going on in the bottom of the pan. That was, kind of what we're going for. So now that we flip this stuff over, we're breaking it down into some smaller pieces. Keep in mind, the smaller the sausage grinds are in the pan at this point, the smaller it's going to be in the gravy. I like a mixture of textures here, so we're going for some finer pieces of sausage as well as some bigger chunks. To me personally, there is nothing more satisfying when eating a sausage gravy than coming across a big chunk of that meat, and it adds so much flavor and extra oomph. So we're going for a little bit of both. All right, so a key thing to notice here is we're not trying to really cook down the sausage a whole lot. All we're trying to do is get out the pink. And what we see here is what the sausage looks like. We just got rid of the last of the pink. So what we're going to do now is add in 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour, making sure we cover all of our sausage, not missing an entire corner of the pan like I did. So now we're just going to mix that all together, making sure that we have all of our little sausage pieces evenly coated. Think of this part as an elevated meat-based roux. So we're going to be cooking the flour and sausage down for an additional 2 minutes, making sure we're getting that raw flour taste out. And once that's done, it should be a nice, light, bright golden brown, kind of like what you see here. And now we're going to bump down our heat to about a medium heat. And then we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter. You want a good 2 tablespoons of fat in the pan before we start making our gravy. And we're going to cook this down for about another minute or so. At the end, the flour that's on top of the sausage should make a nice goldenish paste, kind of as you see here. Now we're going to slowly add in 2 cups of milk, doesn't matter what kind. It's always a good tip to add the milk in parts, little bits at a time. Kind of like I did in the bechamel for the Lasagna Bolognese video. If you guys haven't seen that yet, there'll be a link in the description and a card floating around here. Same concept. The reason why we're adding in small batches at a time is because we can always add more from the same cup and then correct it. If we add everything in at one time, there's no extra milk to thin this out. So better safe than sorry. All right, so now that we've gotten all of our milk in and this gravy comes together really, really quick, I'm going to add in just maybe what's equivalent to 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. I'm seasoning this very easily because I don't know how salty the sausage is, because pork has a lot of salt naturally. Now guys, if you're using salted butter in this recipe, I would skip seasoning. All right, so now that it's cooked down for another minute or so and it's nice and thick, I'm going to give it its first taste test. And it's definitely good, but just needs some salt. So now we're going to season this to taste with some nice kosher salt and ground black pepper. I like a lot of pepper in my sausage gravy. If you're not so fond of it, you can, definitely cut it down or leave it out, but I really wouldn't do that. So we're going to let this cook down for another 30 seconds to a minute. Then we're going to take another taste test. And now we're going to taste it, and Jesus, guys, this is the best gravy I've ever had. 20 minutes really is all it takes to make this thing happen. So now we're just going to push this gravy off to the back, switch out our pans, and start cooking our bacon and eggs. Both of these pans were preheating over medium heat while the gravy was finishing up, so they are definitely ready to roll. And on the pan to my left, I'm just going to be adding in all those beautiful bacon lardons. And in the other pan, I'm going to be tossing in 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter. Now, guys, you might be asking me why I'm using 2 different pans to cook the bacon and eggs. Because, I know a lot of people cook eggs inside of bacon grease. I do like it that way. And I've tried it that way on breakfast pizza before, but it turns out too oily and too salty. There's too much grease for those eggs. So it's better for both texture and flavor reasons to cook them separately. Now, this is the way that I cook my eggs. I'm using this little icing spreader to kind of scramble them in the pan to keep them moving. I don't know why, but whenever I use this spreader, the eggs come out more fluffy. I used to make them with a wooden spoon, and they were nowhere near that way. And we're not going to cook these eggs completely dry. You still want them to have like a glistening layer of oil on top. The reason for that being is because when they cook in the oven on top of the pizza, they're going to dry out and cook even further. And if they're super dry when leaving this pan, they're not going to be very flavorful or juicy or even good. They'll be kind of like rubbery eggs. So we're just going to cook them until they're just done. Not really greasy, but just a little wet on top. Now we're taking those eggs out and putting them in the bowl. Only thing left to do now is finish cooking off our bacon, and then I will see you guys when it's time to make the crust. So in a food processor, we're going to be adding to it 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour that has been thoroughly combined with 2 teaspoons of fine sea salt or table salt, 1 teaspoon of granulated sugar, and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And as you can see, I'm in rare form tonight, as some of that flour totally missed the entrance of my food processor. So hopefully you don't make the same mistake that I did. And now that we've got that in there, we're going to be adding to it 1 cup or 2 sticks of unsalted butter that's been diced into like 3/4 of an inch cubes. Now guys, this butter has to be cold, because if it has been softened or even partially softened, it's not going to blend together and give you those butter flakes. It's just going to make your flour, a paste, and you won't be able to make biscuits with that. It has to be cold, like colder than your ex's heart. So once you have all of those butter pieces in there, we're going to close the lid on this and then pulse it on the dough setting. And we're going to let this ride on the dough setting for about 30 seconds to a minute. Then we're going to check its texture. The texture should feel like wet sand, and you should be able to feel like the butter pellets, because that's how they're going to feel, like little bitty rocks. And I saw some bigger chunks down the bottom of the food processor. So we're going to pulse this again on high for maybe another 25-30 seconds. And now we have the right texture. And now to this, we're going to be adding 1 cup of buttermilk, streaming it in slowly as we are spinning it on, again, the dough cycle of the food processor. And we want to let this spin until we start to see a shaggy dough form. And the way you know that's happened is whenever the dough starts passing the sides of the food processor and you're starting to see it clear up a little bit. So when it looks like this, you know your dough is done. So now it's time to roll it out and start forming it. So now that we've dumped our biscuit dough onto a nice floured cutting board, we're going to start kneading this dough out so it forms a nice cohesive ball. We don't want to overturn this, because then the dough is going to become tough and unworkable. And now that we've got a nice tight ball formed, we're going to start rolling it out. Normally, whenever we roll out biscuits, we want to get the dough into a nice long rectangle shape. But we're making a pizza crust, so we're going to try to roll this out into a nice round rough circle. And once we've achieved that, we're going to start laminating it. And we're going to do this by doing the slap and folds. You've seen me do this before. We're going to tuck in all of our corners, and then we're going to just continually slap the corners together and fold it on top of each other. We're going to do this for a total of 4 or 5 times. We don't want to overwork this, because then it's not going to roll out properly. So now that we've gotten the dough nice and laminated, we're going to reflour our surface, our hands, our rolling pin, and then we're going to roll this sucker out into a nice sized pie crust. And guys, honestly, I'm kind of irritated with how big of a pie this is making because, as you all know, when I make traditional pizzas, I want a very large pizza, and this crust is turning out to be massive. Now, the one thing that I will tell you in between rolling this thing out is, unlike when we're doing a traditional pizza, we want a little more thickness in the center of the crust because we're not using like a thin tomato sauce. This gravy is heavy and all the components that go on top of this are heavy. So we are going to need some extra structural support to withstand the weight of our heavy ingredients. All right, so now that we have formed our gigantic breakfast pizza crust, we have transferred it over to a large pizza pan. Yes, a pizza pan, because pizza stones are only used for real pizzas. And this is just breakfast. So now that we have all of this settled, it's time to start layering on our toppings. First on, of course, are some nice heavy ladles of our delicious fresh sausage gravy. At first, whenever I was spreading this out, I was thinking that the gravy was a bit too thick, but with a little patience and a little coaxing, this thing stretches the entire crust with ease. And next, we're going to be covering this entire pizza with some nice heavy handfuls of shredded mild cheddar. Next goes on the eggs. And guys, when you're piling on the toppings like this, please be sure to cover the entire surface area as best as you can. You really don't want any part of this pizza not to have all of the ingredients. You don't want any bites missing anything. So please make sure you pay very careful attention to this. And last but not least is our final topping, and that is our nice crispy cooked bacon. And guys, I don't know about you, but there is a food bandit that's appearing in the corner of the screen, pulling off toppings before this pizza even gets to the oven. So the goal now is to finish topping this pizza before the food bandit returns. And it didn't take too long before a second round happens, and you can see me using my parsley as a self-defense mechanism to ward off the demon. Any of you guys live with a food bandit at home? If so, your boy needs backup quick. Now that our pizza is completely done and garnished with some nice parsley, if you're using fresh parsley, however, you want to add that right at the end, otherwise it's going to burn. And then we're going to put it in our oven, set to 425 degrees, and we're going to cook this for about 15 to 17 minutes. And I will see you all at reveal. All right, so now we're at reveal, and look at this. Isn't she beautiful? Yes, you too, baby. And guys, I mentioned a minute ago, it's kind of frustrating. This is the size I want all my New York style pizzas to be. And the only one that gets to be in this size is this one right here, and it's not even a real pizza. How does that even happen? But overall time lapse of the cooking of this dish, and there's a food bandit on the horizon. Yes, the food bandit is the wife, as you have seen earlier. She's a food snatcher. You ever heard of a body snatcher? She's the same thing, but only with food. Anyhow, before the rest of this pizza disappears, before I can get to try it, the time lapse of this entire, cooking process took about an hour and 20 minutes. So it's not really something you could do like on a busy weeknight. I could have gotten this done a little bit sooner if I wasn't recording it. So for regular at-home cooks, you can probably get it done in an hour to an hour and 10 minutes even. So the bottom crust is perfectly cooked. It's got a nice browning on it. This is nice and light and fluffy, but cooked through. So there's only one thing left to do, and that's to try it. And now, guys, this is great if you want to break out of your usual breakfast routine. You don't have to always go for the same old, same old. If you want to make something nice for the kids to take to school, or to eat before school, or make something nice for your partner or your spouse, it's nice to think outside of the box. And honestly, guys, if you're like me and you work a lot of hours and you end up, being overtired and half the time waking up at the last minute with only a few minutes to spare, this keeps in the fridge for a while. And you can technically grab a slice when you're running late, heat it up for, maybe 30, 40 seconds, eat it, get your butt out the door, and it is everything. All right? So the only thing left to do is to try it. And first incoming taste test goes to the Food Bandit. So we're going to give her a nice slice here. You'll be hearing my thoughts and her thoughts. This is yours, baby.
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you.
All right, and this is my slice. I'm really nervous and excited because this is the first time I've ever made this completely from scratch without using really any canned processed product. Ooh. Holy hell, that's good. Like, I've never had one that was this outrageously good.
That's fantastic.
You heard it from Miss Mad Chef over here. It's absolutely fantastic. Guys, it's worth the labor. This could go for several meals. And again, look at that perfectly cooked crust. There's no doughy center. Everything is melted. That sausage gravy is phenomenal. A fresh crust. Better than anything you can get out of the can. Guys, you don't have to go for a process, quick, easy. You can get better flavor and you can do it so simply at home. All of these ingredients, all of these components are so easy. And any cook of any level of experience can make this without a lot of burden. Anyone can scramble eggs and cook bacon and sausage, and it might take a little bit to get a hold of the, you know, the biscuit making and the gravy making, but all that stuff comes very quickly. Again, if you like this kind of content, guys, please don't forget to smash the like, share, and subscribe. Show all your friends, and I'll see you again next time. Have a good night.